Billy, thank you so much for spending some time with us here at the Sessions. You have had a career that is amazing, and you continue to have this amazing career.
Thank you.
Which is extremely exciting to watch. I've heard you play several times. I had a chance to hear you in Japan with Dennis Chambers.
Excellent.
Gosh, it was just so inspiring and so exciting. Your sound is unique. There's so many things about you that is worthy of talking and capturing.
Well, very kind of you.
Thank you. Where did it begin for you? How did music enter your life?
Well, it was a kind of I wouldn't say a musical household, but my mom was a fan of the Sinatra era.
Nice.
From that particular generation. So there's always music, always record players. And I had older brothers and sisters, and they all got into rock and roll. Everly Brothers, when that whole thing happened, started. There was even before the Beatles, Jerry Lee Lewis and things like that.
Absolutely.
And they were into that type of thing. And then when the Beatles hit, of course, I still was pretty young, but because I had older brothers and sisters, they got into it, and I, by proximity, got into it myself. And it was just an explosion of everybody was into music and songs and bands and playing. Everybody was.
Yeah.
It's just the schools were divided up by what bands you were into. There was the Rolling Stones or the Beatles. There was that thing, and there was folk versus rock, electric versus acoustic, and every kind of little divide. But there weren't, like today, I believe, there were dividing lines. They were not walls. And often you'd go to a show and you'd see three completely disparate bands together. Aerosmith with the Mahavishnu Orchestra.
Right.
Wow, we wouldn't see that today.
Unique combination, yeah.
So at a very young age, and I was very lucky. There was a band that lived right around the corner from my house. The Hesse family, Joe Hesse and Jimmy Hesse, they were in bands, and Joe was a bass player, and he was a really cool guy. He was a friend of my big brother's, and I wanted to be like Joe. And so I eventually, and he's still a dear friend of mine to this day.
That's magical. That's great. And so you started playing bass. You purchased your first bass, or how'd that get into your hands?
I was really interested in getting a bass, and my sister got an acoustic guitar. And it was her guitar, and she liked the Donovan, and she liked Peter, Paul, and Mary, and she liked folk music. She wanted to play that. But I was thinking that I'd learn the heavier songs, or the songs by the Beatles or the Stones. And eventually I kept sneaking in and playing a guitar so much that I actually got a little bit better than she was. So she kind of abandoned it, and I took it over, waiting hopefully to get a bass. Now at the time, my grandmother lived with us, and she was a wonderful woman, but a little bit stern. And she caught wind of what was going on. She said, put her foot down. As long as I'm alive, there'll never be an electric guitar in this house. So I said, well, it limits my possibilities there. So I swear to God, she passed away, and with the insurance money, I got my very first electric. I actually got an electric guitar first because they didn't have a bass, and then finally I got traded in with the bass. So I joked that we have an RPM meter on her grave and how fast she might be spinning at any given time. But in fact, she was a wonderful woman. I'm sure she would have approved eventually. But there's that was before my mom's generation.
Yeah.
My grandmother was like, I don't know about this Beatles stuff.
But I'm sure what you have done
I'm sure
incredibly well with your career still.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
But it was fun.
Beautiful. So were there lessons involved? Did you start to get involved taking lessons? Was there a teacher involved in the area?
Well, there was Bob and Ray's Music on Niagara Falls Boulevard. Gave lessons. So my mom thought, if you want to do this properly, I'll pay for it. I think they were like $2 for the lesson once a week.
Nice.
I went down there, but the guy who was the teacher in the music store was in a local band. So we went in and would talk about music and bands and records, and he had the little sheet with the ledger lines and all the musical information on it. But on the other side, it was blank. So he would turn it over, and he'd show me the chords to songs that I wanted to learn.
Cool.
First one, of course, was Gloria by Shadows of Night. And anyone that plays a fretted instrument or picks up a guitar is one of the first songs ever. And then Substitute by The Who, and I still have all those sheets of paper.
That's incredible.
I swear to God.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
He actually ended up not really giving me lessons. He was just showing me the chords to songs. And so I never really learned. So I remember one time he started feeling guilty, and I had some lesson book, and it had all these old songs that I never heard of, and the notes. And so finally we went through and we found a song that I had heard before. So by ear, I wasn't reading, but I was playing, the note. He goes, hey, this is pretty good. Yeah, well, I'm working on it. So we were both lying to each other. Eventually we stopped that, and I went off and I would just start to learn songs by listening to them on the record.
Right.
Because I realized that's what he was doing. Right. So I would put a song on, get a record and put it on and figure out the chords and generally get it pretty darn close.
Right. So the same challenge. You had at the time LP. You're moving the needle to change so you did what we did years ago. We had to work really hard to capture that knowledge. It wasn't easy. It's very easy today to understand.
Yeah, there were no magazines, no tablature, no YouTube videos, and not a lot of instruction around. It's hard to find anyone. And if you did find an instructor, most of them were of another generation. They were old school. They wanted you to learn properly. Which in retrospect, I sure wish I would have spent more time on that because I don't know much theory or technical information about music. Everything I know is by ear. I'm always learning in that particular field, of course. But I think it's a good idea to know both. I've seen musicians that know one or the other, and what I do in music and the way I play in the bands I perform with and the type of live shows I do, it's better to be an ear player. If you can do both, that's even more. But if you only do ear or only do notation, for me in particular, I tend to gravitate towards the guys who do notation, and that's not to put any negativity on the guys who do only notation. Only the idea is so much of rock music and popular music is, hey, I got an idea. Here's these chords. Okay, how about this for a melody? And you're not stopping and writing things down.
Yeah, it's immediate.
So that's why that immediacy is an important thing.
Interesting.
But I never mean to diminish the importance of understanding the background to any endeavor you go into, and understanding the educational aspect that leads up to bricklaying or
absolutely.
Whatever it is.
There's something about self-taught that is exciting, because that means you were driven that much.
Exactly right.
You were driven that much to find that mystery. You had to find the word. You had to fight for the knowledge.
You did.
When you fight for knowledge, you earn
really
it.
get
When
it.
you earn it, you own it. So I mean, that's really kind of what it seems like you went through.
Exactly right. And I do believe if you tried to take like a survey of musicians and looked at the self-taught musicians and the ones that are went to lessons and whatever, you might see a surge of success with the self-taught. But it would give you the wrong answer. It's not because they were self-taught. It's because they had that passion to whether anyone was going to teach them or not, they were going to learn it. And that's why they've done better, I believe. Whereas certainly many people that went the educational route have done very, very well and gone on to huge success, as good as anyone. But that drive, that's why when people say to me, I want to take lessons. They go, wait. There's books in the library, there's YouTube videos, and there's also the thing you can just start doing. And I think it's important to have that drive first, and then discover, I need to know more, so I want to go to college. I need to know more about it. I want to find a mentor, somebody who's an expert at this, and follow him around. Or I need to know more, and I just want to go off on an island with my instrument and stay with it for a year.
With the relationship of that instrument, and then get to know it. I mean, that's pretty powerful, So where did you start getting into professional playing? When you started getting paid to play the bass? How did that start?
My first gig was at the Beef and Ale House in Buffalo, New York. We had 11 guys in our band. It was 4 horns, three singers in front, guitar, bass, drums, keyboards, and I made $7.50.
What a great bill. What kind of music was it?
It was Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Chicago. See, now I'm playing with guys that were educated players. So one of my very first bands, it was a horn band, so they had charts and they had things. So I heard these terms tossed about. And to this day, if I pick up a sax or a trumpet, I can get a tone out of it. I know where to put my fingers because I was in a horn band. It was pretty cool. And fortunately, they were all really great musicians. They're really wonderful players. So that was a great introduction to that for me. And then after that, it was tough to keep a band like that together. So, and I was still in high school. And then another regular rock band around our area that was successful. Eventually I managed to get in with them, and we started just playing night after night after night after night, 3, 4, 5 sets a night, every single night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all the way through And it's looking back at the time. Sometimes it was a little drudgery, but not so bad.
Yeah.
If you go out, it was all your friends.
Yeah.
There was free beer and free drinks and hanging out, and there's beautiful girls to talk with, and your buddies are there too, and you're playing your favorite songs.
What a lifestyle.
It was amazing. But if it ever got into any amount of grind or drudgery, looking back on that, man, it was the best training in the world.
Yeah.
Because you had to get up on stage every night and perform and get people excited enough to get them to come back the next time or next week, and or to stay long enough to go to the bar and start drinking, so the club owner starts making money and you eventually get paid, and then you get asked back.
Well, what a great concept, because that brings in two things. You had to learn your instrument well enough that you could be a part of the band, and then you had to be concerned about the band having a sound together that could then produce that result to create the demand to bring the people back.
Exactly.
I mean, and this is like in any business, that's really kind of what you were building. You were developing your product and this band product.
I'm glad you said product, because that's a point. People come to me sometimes mystified about how do I go, well, how would you, if you made a hamburger and you wanted to sell hamburgers, how would you do it?
Right.
You'd make a great hamburger.
Right.
And then you'd figure out how to make enough of them.
Yeah, right.
And then get them to your customers, and making sure when they left they're going to come back again.
Right.
It's a similar thing. I don't mean to remove the greatest art form there is and put it on the level of hamburgers.
Well, I happen to like hamburgers too, so.
Yeah, we all got to eat. So I think it's the same thing happens everywhere, but sometimes it becomes mystical because you don't see the parallels.
Yeah.
And we had a product, we had a set that we could do. We had a whole bunch of great songs by the Beatles and the Who and the Stones and Hendrix and Robin Trower and Three Dog Night and Grand Funk Railroad.
Right.
And, millions of bands.
Yeah,
and we play the popular songs, and people want to hear those songs and dance to them, and to hear them live is great, and we could mimic them pretty well.
Right.
And which brings up another very important point. A lot of people kind of dismiss the copy bands or cover bands. I have the Beatles' very first demo. There's a bootleg shop in Japan where you can buy these amazing CDs of stuff that are available nowhere else. And I got their first demo years ago. And since then it's been released officially. So
right.
But it was about 20 songs on the Beatles' very first Decca Records demo.
Incredible.
And guess how many of them are original songs?
Probably very few of them.
Not one.
Not one.
Zero.
All cover stuff.
They were all cover bands.
Wow.
And the Beatles, I don't mean to make a parallel to such greatness to my humble self, but there is, intellectually, there is a parallel.
Yeah.
They were playing clubs in Germany on the Reeperbahn, and go back to Liverpool, and maybe to get out to London and just play clubs, play copy tunes, play to people coming out to dance. And that was, you see what that training led up to.
Yeah.
Arguably one of the greatest writing entities in musical,
the history of music,
in popular music.
Absolutely.
And I think they got that by doing that every night, being out and also seeing what turns people on.
What works and what didn't work. They fine-tune their product.
Exactly right. So you see when people are sitting down, or not, you're losing interest in the band. Okay, we got to change direction, and they would, and they learned how to also be entertaining.
Yeah.
Where the famous German incident where I see about in many Beatles documentaries, Germans would say, I'm not sure if I got it right, but mach show, make a show, do something. Those are stand there playing, do something. So they would. And interesting parallel. Recently, I read a great book called Van Halen Rising, and the band Van Halen. When they finally got David Lee Roth in the band, he urged them, don't just stand there. You got to run around when you play, And
which David does fantastic.
Yeah, so
at the highest level.
You see the similar things happening in many different areas, styles, genres, different things, but the same things hold true. You have to have a great product, and you got to have something that people are interested in and enjoy. I see musicians get kind of miffed that they're doing this technical expertise that they spend like hundreds, thousands of hours on, and they go out and they do it and nobody pays attention. And well, it's not their fault.
Yeah.
It's not their fault. It's your responsibility to do something that you catch them. Because there are musicians who have technical impossibilities, and people come from miles around to see them.
Right.
So what are you doing that you're not getting people's attention?
Right.
Doesn't mean you got to wear a crazy hat or be a
clown.
Pander.
Yeah.
We don't need to pander, but we need to communicate. And that's the essential element for me of all music, is it is a communication. We're communicating to.
But there's also an awareness that I noticed you had, specifically when I heard you play a few times, in connecting with the audience. You are extremely aware of the audience.
Oh, yes.
Many musicians are turned off and they just play their music, and the audience just observes what's happening, as opposed to you, you're sucking them in. The excitement of the music, you're reeling us in. You got us on the hook, and you're reeling us in, and it's very exciting in the process. So you're that aware. That's powerful. That's a powerful,
very powerful
lesson. Yeah.
Well, I believe we are one. When there's a night, that's why live musical performance, I believe, will never go away.
Right.
You can watch a video on your phone. You can put virtual reality glasses on and be like you're in the band, but there's nothing like being in a room full of hot, sweaty bodies, watching a band do their thing, spontaneous. Anything could happen. And that excitement, there really is a oneness to that. And I've done shows recently, in a packed time. I did a show in Paris about 2 years ago. You couldn't have gotten another body in the room other than if you had chopped them up and put them in pieces. It was just so crowded, and it was hot as an oven, and we did a show, and it was magical. It was like the whole room was one being. It was just an incredible thing. Happened recently in South Korea also. We did an incredible moment there, and that's happened through the years. When you see that and you have that happen to you, it just drives you to keep going, to do more.
It's also, when you think of and what you do, is the spiritual side of what happens with music. When you connect that many people for that moment of time, and everyone's on the same message at the same point, listening to the same vibrations of sound, there's something really incredible about that.
It is incredible. And I have been in an audience when I've had those moments as an audience member.
Yeah.
And for me, that was being a fan was a huge inspiration for me to do the thing that turned me on as a fan. When I heard that thing, I want to do a thing so that when somebody hears it, they oh, I gotta have that, or who is that, or I want to go to that show. That to me, that's I'm so glad that I was a fan of music, and to this day, my iTunes collection is 2 terabytes of music. Every genre you could imagine, and I spend many hours, almost every day, going through my songs and listening to things and finding the impossible. But it's as a fan to become, as a consumer of the product, to suddenly be the guy manufacturing, selling the product. It's great because you really know the whole thing. And it really, I hate to make it sound so. The word product sometimes has that corporate industrial kind of a thing where most musicians and people involved in music, they're not of that mind. But we see that that's really is what you have to call it technically. It is a product. It's what you produce.
But I think that's really what they did with the Beatles, with Sid Bernstein and these guys. I think they saw them as a product early on.
Yes, somebody got smart.
And someone got real smart at how we're going to market this.
Exactly.
Let them do their thing. But I think that later on, the Beatles became very aware of that product. And which is, it's an anomaly of itself and what it is. Are there any bass players that you listen to or look up to or admire? Is there anyone that you have had as almost like a mentor to a certain degree from your instrument?
Too many to list.
Oh, interesting. Okay, well that's interesting.
And not only bass players too. Also drummers, very important to me. I've always been a drum fan, a fan of drumming. I went to see Billy Cobham, one of the famous, mind-blowing,
dear friend and great
game-changing drummers ever. When he was with a band called Dreams.
Yes, I
Brecker
remember
Brothers on horns. At the University of Buffalo.
Wow.
Saw that show for $7.
Boy, the money that you made from your first band, you cost you for the ticket. That's nice.
Actually, I think it was only $3.50 for that show. But and piano players, guitar players, of course, but sax too. I was a big fan of a lot of Sonny Rollins, Eddie Harris, guys like that I love very much. So I try to listen to all music, classical music too. I'm a big, huge classical music fan. I listen in my car. The only music I listen to is classical music. That's all I have on. I don't have any other stations. So it's very important to me. But as far as bass players go, as I said earlier, the guy that lived around the corner from me, Joe Hesse, he was a big influence. And he was a great bass player. He was a really solid, rock solid. And I went to his house one time, and he told me the most important thing about bass playing. I didn't know it at the time. One of the very first things I ever heard about bass was I went over to his house and it was just Joe and his drummer. I said, Joe, where's the rest of the band? How come it's just you guys practicing? He goes, well, when the drummer hits the drum, I got to play a bass note at the same time. So I'm playing a bass note with his bass drum. So I'm moving the notes around so that as he plays drums, I'm
locked in.
And I thought, that's it. And at clinics and seminars, I sometimes tell young players that, and some of them are surprised to hear that, even after they've been playing for years. I'm thinking, that's a little frightening. This is one of the first things you should ever know. So Joe was one of the very first mentors. I said he's still a dear friend of mine to this day. But then early bands, the Yardbirds, Paul Samwell-Smith, unsung hero, just great. Everybody talks, well, Jeff Beck and Eric Clapton and Jimmy Page were in the Yardbirds. Yeah, but Paul Samwell-Smith was too, and he was an unbelievable player. Great, just amazing jamming and great playing. Of course, McCartney changed the world.
Absolutely.
And his bass playing was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And he was a full-on entertainer too. A good guy to know about because he sang, he wrote, he played piano, played guitar, but he was mainly a bass player.
Yeah. Played drums too.
I'm sure.
He did, yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I urge almost any musician, if you're going to be in a band, guitar, bass, drums, keyboard, whatever, you got to speak drum. You got to learn drums. I sit down behind a kid, learn how to just keep time. That's all you do, kick, hat, snare, just to get an idea of what's going on. So your communication with your drummer is going to be that much better.
Yes.
Especially as a bass player.
Nice.
But yeah, Paul Samwell-Smith, super important to me. John Entwistle, Jack Bruce, Paul McCartney, as I said. Yeah. And then through the years, every couple of months, some new guy would come along. Jack Cassidy, Jefferson Airplane, unbelievable, great player.
Yeah.
Glenn Cornick with Jethro Tull when he started out. So I think it's important sometimes to understand where things came from and through the years. So a lot of times when I give clinics now and seminars, sometimes I bring my laptop, my little hard drive with my iTunes collection, which is a pain in the neck to go through. There's so many songs in there, but I'll pick out great moments of bass playing that really all us bass players heard it and went, wow, something's different now. We got to go learn that.
Interesting.
So we would. I played these songs in my clinic, and a lot of people never heard of these guys, never heard about it. And it was kind of interesting to see their faces when they see the moment. The world was only this, and then at that point, this musician came, and the world became something completely different.
Right.
And the world changed. And as a result of that world changing, the influences were across the entire spectrum of life, not just music, but of fashion, what people were into, and what people thought politically, and even religious points of view. All of it were affected, which is why I believe very strongly in saying that music is the greatest art form. It really is the thing that changes more things than any other art form.
Interesting, very, very, very powerful. It's kind of interesting that you talk about you doing these clinics and seeing these young kids. It's amazing to see with all of the bands you have played with and continue to do, the intensity and the drive that you have, that you continue at a high level, which is extremely inspiring. And these names that you're mentioning, part of the message of this interview is for them to research these names that you're speaking about. Let them go and research it and Google it and find out who these people are, because that really is what has built you to be the player that you are. That's the core of who you are. That's very, very, very beautiful. It really is.
It's very important to stand on the shoulders of those who came before you.
Yeah.
And I stand on many, many, many shoulders. There's a sea of shoulders that I'm standing on. And I see also players now that are on my shoulders. That learned things from me, and they went on and did their thing. They didn't do my thing, but they took something from me, made it their own, moved on, and it's what they do now is, to a large degree, not even recognizable as being connected to me. Right. But if you ask them to trace back where it came from, they'll say, oh, well I heard this thing from Sheehan years ago, and I liked it, but I wanted to do something different with it. Now they have this whole other world. So it's great to see that chain continuing. Tim Bogert, a band called the Vanilla Fudge.
Absolutely.
Great player, psychedelic era. There was another band that didn't play any originals. So it was all
Carmen Apiece was a dear friend,
incredible,
and just great band.
A New York City band.
Yeah.
But they would take songs that were hits or great songs and do them in an arrangement you could never possibly imagine. Their version of Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles is iconic. It's nothing like the original at all. Yeah. And but you see how they take something and change it. And the bass player Tim was such a huge influence on me, and I'm honored and privileged to be an acquaintance with him to this day now. And I always have to say when I'm doing an interview I always got to give some honor to Tim and the other people I mentioned, as well as a lot of other musicians. It's very important. But I learned so much from them. And again, you don't just learn notes or their style or the songs they played. It starts to become a part of you. And for a musician to have a style or a sound, because every musician has a sound, in the beginning it's hard to delineate and differentiate what your sound is. Because as you go through the years, it becomes more obvious and more concrete and more defined.
Right.
But all that comes from the things you take your influences from. Mostly musical, but it can come from anywhere.
Right.
Then eventually when you do get that sound and that technique, it's a part of what you originally ingested as a player and grew along with that. And the end result is sometimes nothing like where it came from. But I think it's incredibly interesting to see what comes of that initial inspiration and where it goes to and how it ends up. And when I hear guys today that are of a particular musical genre or style that is unique and worthy of praise and listening and attention, and find out where they got it from, because I had no idea that's what you were into. It's very, very funny.
With all that you're doing, I think you're working on like 5 albums now. I mean, is there an organizational plan that you have? How do you organize all of this and put this together and manipulate it so you can stay on schedule and make it all happen and be prepared for each recording?
Well, that's actually a good question. I try to just keep a to-do list. I still do it by hand on a sheet of paper. It's a little easier than doing it electronically. Some people are more savvy with their electronics. They can do it with that. And just try to keep a list of all the jobs coming up, all the things you need to do. Because not only performing and playing and recording and writing, but I also work a lot with my gear and my basses and my electronics. And I do a lot. I build a lot of my own things. I make my own straps, because they got to be my way, and I'm the only guy that can make them my way. I set up my own instruments because it's got to be set up a particular way. So from the very beginning, I was very, very hands-on and taking apart and modifying instruments and making them fit me and do what I wanted them to do. And so there's not only the amount of time spent on learning songs, recording them, or performing them, or also writing them, and composing them, but also everything that goes along with it. So when people say to me, what outside of music, do you have any hobbies? And I go, not really. If I'm not working on gear, either a bass or electronics, and I've done about 5 different products I've brought to market that I've, I wouldn't say invented, but developed. Products and various things. If I'm not working on anything of that nature, I'm at my iTunes finding some amazing lounge music from the early '60s.
Boy, the dedication and the commitment that you have is just so inspiring at so many different levels, and it's amazing.
Well, I love it.
It really is. It shows it.
And if you love it, it's great. And I urge everyone that's getting involved in music to really. If you know that you love it and you really do, and it's something to you. And now I listen to a piece like one of my favorite pieces of classical music, Clair de Lune by Debussy. And I hear that piano piece. I've got a couple versions of it, and man, there are moments in that where it gets quiet. He hits one little chord, and it just tears my heart out and brings tears to my eyes sometimes. I hear this incredible piece of music, and I must know 200 pieces of music that will affect me so much. And I think that is so important to me. That is so vital to me. That's what I want. That's what I love. I want to be around it. I want to play it. I want to learn it. I want to listen to it. That's my passion. To follow your passion, if you can really establish what that passion is, that's a gift to have, to know that is your passion. Because now you've got a compass, and it's pointed north, and you're ready to go. That passion, once it's aligned, you really know that that's what you love. Man, I really look at it as a gift, because to this day, I live here in LA, and about 10 miles from my house is my little room I have with my amp set up, my gear and stuff. And I go in there. I was there yesterday for hours. Before that, I was with a company, a musical instrument manufacturer out in way out the 101, way out in Thousand Oaks.
Right.
working with them, developing some software and some sounds and tones. Played bass for a couple of hours, got home. I'm working on building a couple of basses myself, so I was chiseling away there, and then I went to bed. So it was a whole day spent, and I'm not thinking about it in any way other than that. It's just had these things I want to do, and it's what I love to do, and what a great day.
Boy, that's powerful to be that passion driven at all aspects of the instrument, which is pretty amazing.
And I really do consider it a gift, because I don't know what it is that really drives me sometimes, but I know I love music and I love playing, and I love sitting down with my bass and just playing. And one of my happiest moments when I'm on tour and I got a day off and I'm in a hotel and they got just the right comfortable chair that I can sit in all day with that bass, and I move it over to the window, open it up, look out over, Tokyo or Prague or Moscow or Sao Paulo or the incredible places I've been lucky enough to perform, and sit and play all day. How great! It's amazing. I really am supremely thankful that I'm in a position I can do that.
That is beautiful. With these clinics that you've done and now meeting many, many young students, asking you all these questions. In closing, what would you say to the next generation as kids watch this and they are huge fans of yours and discovering what you're doing? What message would you leave for them that future generations, 10, 20, 30 years from now, that they could still maintain and learn from your direction and your vision in music? What would you tell them?
Wow. I'd say dig deep. I mean, if you're going to go for it, really go for it and get into it deep and spend your time. We all hear that it's a little cliche now, the 10,000 hour rule. I've got to be at about 30. I mean, I've done nothing but play. And it really does show when you really spend the time and dig deep and look into it. If you're a violinist, get deep. Where did it come from? Who are the greats? Yeah. Why were they the greats? Yeah. What was their life like? Yeah. Who tunes it differently? Is there anyone who tuned it differently? What about the gypsy violinists? What's different about them? Yeah. There's a million different kinds of violin playing. What about the bluegrass thing? There's all kinds of things to take from. If you're a drummer, there's a million different ways to approach a snare drum, a bass drum, and even that is a whole unique thing to have a kit. Yeah. There was a time when there was no kit.
Absolutely
there wasn't
right.
a kit. And eventually somebody figured out how to hit a drum with their foot to make a kit. And now you look at it like it's standard and normal that everybody has a kit. See where it all came from. And the lesson I believe to learn from is look at ourselves now, look at yourself now as the guy who didn't have a pedal to hit the bass drum and had to figure out a way to make that big low sound to mark where one was, so we could do accents on the snare. Unheard of. No one ever heard of that. Unbelievable. That was a whole new thing. Well, you're in the same position at this point. It may look like everything has been thought of and everything's been invented and everything's already been done already. But remember, at the turn of the century, the U.S. Patent Office was considering shutting down because they thought everything had already been invented. And that's at the turn of the century. So right now, I think that's a good thing to have in your mind. Dig deep and look into what you have and what the possibilities are, and know that they really are limitless. And anything you see any other musician do that may seem out of your reach, it's not. I always write to people, say, anything I do, you can do. It may take you some time, but there's nothing you can't do. And I really believe that's true. There's nothing you can't do. I've seen people with no arms playing guitar with their feet.
Absolutely.
Nothing stopped them.
Absolutely.
See blind musicians. I worked with blind musicians when I was a very young kid who played at Hammond B3. Genius player. Nothing stopped them. See people, they're old, I'm too old to play. Well, start playing anyway. A couple of years in, he's got a whole new thing, a whole new point of view. I'm too young to play. I've seen 2-year-olds play, put me to shame completely, So there's nothing you can't do, nothing you can't do. And really, if you could just ignite that passion, get a match, light that thing on fire, and the adventure it will take you on, and the trip that you go on, at the end of it, it will be the story for the ages. And it will be a life properly lived, I believe.
That is beautiful, boy. When there's a will, there's a way.
Absolutely
If
true.
there has ever been an incredibly strong will in the music industry, you own it.
Very kind.
For that, we thank you so much on behalf of the sessions, Billy. You are
Thank you so much.
fantastic. Thank you so much.
What a pleasure. Very good.